First, I want to thank Arlette Bolag here, and we share the same passion for many years, and I really appreciate her energy and love of these textiles, because there are a few people who have shops, etc., and they can sell textiles, but other people do this just with the heart.
Yeah.
And I think Arlette for years and before with Tony Hutma, their pieces have been also in the past some references for me. So their taste. Yes, I followed your things in Halle many times. I have them all.
I have no clue.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here in this wonderful city of Zurich with this nice weather, and the Anatolian Kilims present always a few questions to the researchers and collectors, although they have been discovered by the Western eyes in the last 50 years. In the last 30 to 40 years, there have been many research, a lot of things written, and also some exhibitions that have been made. Some of the kilims have entered museums both in Turkey and also in the West, like in the San Francisco Museum or Berlin Museum have some kilims. However, some fundamental questions still are left open about the true nature of the kilim. And I will come to what these questions I asked myself, and the thought that they were not properly addressed by the current level of the research. In contrast to the pile carpets, it is difficult to trace the kilim's aesthetic and historical development, because pile carpets appear in Western paintings. The kilims were not much recorded in historical or trade registries, and were not woven in officially organized workshops. So tracing their aesthetic development and historical development is extremely difficult. The field studies that were made at the last quarter of the 20th century and early this century only looked at the remnants of a vanishing tradition, and they were able to collect only scarce information about its different aspects. And that ranged from the meaning of the motifs and to the intended use of the textiles. Why is the kilim used? Why is that size, etc. At the same time, this new field has inspired some speculative, mythic, or wishful interpretations and theories in the dealers and collectors. So some of these are recorded in the published books, and some are still very much alive on virtual media, continuing to influence and sometimes confuse the opinions of people who approach the kilims. Now, in parallel to their aesthetic qualities, to which also Western eyes are now acquainted because of the art movement in the 20th century, early 20th century, and the abstract art and modern art, we can better understand the kilim's aesthetic qualities. However, they also imply more to the mind than to the eyes. So, as a collector and researcher of the textiles in the last 4 decades, my feeling was that some fundamental questions about the true nature of the Anatolian kilim still remain to be properly addressed. For instance, what makes a kilim design immediately recognizable among other designs? If you look at the design, a textile pattern, you say, oh, it looks like a kilim design. What makes us recognize this so easily? And what mental processes create that style of motifs? Why is the technique solely restricted to sleek tapestry technique? And also, when is the fine line between artifact and art is crossed? Which characteristics define the kilim's aesthetics and also their influence, their agency on us? And also, what are the keys of the communication that happens between us and the kilims despite our ignorance of their own language. So also, sometimes we also project our own myths over the kilims, looking at something, we say, oh, this looks like that, etc. So what we know, we can project them over their forms and colors. So that requires, actually, I was convinced that it requires a 360-degree tour of different disciplines for covering the aspects of the Anatolian kilims. Like that should include anthropology, ethnography, semiotics, mythology, philosophy, and archaeology also. So in the 40 pages essay in the book I have written, I propose to approach the Anatolian kilim from a different angle that I believe that has not been yet explored. It identifies and questions some of the paradigms, for some of the assumptions that were used in the kilim study so far, by using that concepts in the field of the anthropology of art, and also more specifically in the anthropology of images, with concepts that were developed early by authors like Franz Boas, Ernst Cassirer, or Hans Belting, or others in the. And these people have studied the relationships between the human cultures and their artifacts in general, and also mostly their image traditions in particular. And so my approach is based on these type of ideas. So the book's aim is not to provide the final proof to a new theory, and don't get afraid about this, but to open new paths of reflection about the semantic and artistic contents of Anatolian kilims, such that we can better approach them. In this new approach, first thing is that Anatolian kilims should be considered mainly as the conduit of an iconographic tradition, rather than only as ethnographic functional objects. So, in parallel to their functionality, the true reason of being is to perpetuate this tradition as a medium in textile format. Like, the textile is the medium that carries the image as a canvas would carry a painting. So to understand this iconographic tradition, on the other side, it is necessary to analyze its formal characteristics and the set of mental operations that organizes the forms and the nature of the image space. Both the weaver's thought process leading to the development of the work and the observer's thought process in deciphering the image must be considered in that approach. Only once this point is established, we can make a correspondence with the semantics of iconography and with the beliefs and traditions of the cultures that would possibly have generated these images. So, in the beginning, I mean, we know that kilims have been made for the last 500 years by the nomads and peasants of Anatolia. But if you make a tabula rasa, I mean, if you forget this and say, okay, let's forget who made them, but then let's look at the images and then how, which cultural beliefs would correspond to the type of images that are with the kilims. This is the thought process. So, it is also particularly important to consider the image tradition within the context of other products of a given culture. That is, like the oral traditions, dances, community rituals, myths, and also their sacred beliefs. Within this context, I also address the development and transmission of the designs. For the study of the iconographic tradition, my starting point is going to be through the question of style. So a style is defined by its forms and colors and by the technique used to embody these elements into a given medium. The images embedded in Anatolian kilims are made following a unique style that distinguishes them from other textiles and other images, including the tapestries and even other slit tapestries made in Anatolia and in its neighboring regions. This style is consciously or unconsciously recognizable by any observer of the kilim. But even so, in order to identify it more precisely, its formal characteristics need to be described. So, and I'm talking again, this question of style is very important. Art historians have linked the question of style as being fully related to the world representation of a given culture. Like they develop as means of representing the perceived truth of the world by each civilization or community. As such, for instance, the way ancient Egyptians were depicting, their people in their bas-reliefs and papyrus drawings, or Oriental miniatures, or the perspective used in Renaissance, are all part of a specific image style to represent contemporary vision. Each of these styles also obeys a set of conventions and constraints. So, analyzing Anatolian kilims from this point of view, we can define two basic elements that make up the kilim style. The first one is the mutuality of forms, and the second is the color fields. These two fundamental elements. Now, I think we can show some examples of these. So the mutuality of forms is actually the principles of reciprocity. Okay, the principle of reciprocity basically that is used in the kilims, and here you can see that for instance, the red area and the white area are reciprocally made. What does that mean? Is that actually on the kilim surface, no form can come into existence without creating another form in its neighboring space. So every time you make a design, you are obliged to create another form in its neighborhood. So this is the principle number one, which is the principle of reciprocity. But this form cannot be just anything. It is also a different meaning, such that, I am talking about mutuality of forms because they are bound, linked together. I think we can, for instance, this kilim, you see that here, and also when people weave, the kilim is never woven just a straight line. Actually, they first weave, for instance, part of this motif, and then the rest is empty, such that they have full consciousness about what is going to be as the next. So here, we see, because we are used in the Western view to the colored one on a white ground. Okay, but this is not true. Actually, it's the white ground has also its form. So actually, the two are mutual, and they are bound together. So the more the weaver knows her tradition and her designs, the more this mutuality is reinforced. So it means that the total surface is covered with mutual forms, and it becomes a special space that eliminates the notion of a background. There's no subject and background like on, let's say, a portrait. Okay, usually we have a portrait of a man, so there is a subject, and then there's a background. In a kilim space, there is no background. So that is and there's an ambiguity. This is why there is an ambiguity, and we have to question all the time, what is the real design to be looked at? And this ambiguity is also existing in modern art, in the abstract paintings, but also this questioning something in front of the artwork is really the important part that makes the interest and raises our consciousness to a higher level. So this logical form generation leads also to fundamental implications about the perception of the universe in the kilim producing cultures. Let me just show also another example. Sorry for your arms, but here, I mean, people may see only colored figures, on a white ground. Okay, this is what we call saliency. What comes forward? Okay, saliency. So here, but at the same time, there is actually here a tree on the white ground where there are forms which are the same. You know, there is a kind of a being here with arms. So the white space has actually a meaning. So yet the kilim designs may go one step further than just creating reciprocal forms, each having a separate meaning. Eventually, on most successful designs, the association of both forms, okay, as I explained here, results in a superior meaning. It's like when you put, you know, two words together, you come to a different conclusion. And like on this one, if you understand also what is behind in the white, and then you see these colored ones, like, let's say, like birds around, then all of a sudden you see a tree with birds together instead of just seeing the colored forms as, okay, it's a bird decoration. So this is what helps us to understand better the what's in the kilims. Now here I want to introduce, this is why, the concept of associative reading, which is important. So when you wonder which figure to read, and we are having this this question of in our mind of ambiguity, the ambiguity should be resolved by accepting both parts of the design, and then trying to understand the meaning of the both parts of the design. So there is no exclusion. There is no exclusion of one or the other. That's a very important part in reading the kilims. The second fundamental element in the Anatolian kilim style is the use of the plain color areas large enough for the color to blossom fully and to be perceived in its individuality. Okay? And this, I think, we can see, and what I'm calling about the color field are these red areas, for instance, on which which carry this motif, but sometimes they can be empty. Okay, and this color field, the color takes prominence over the form. So it becomes expressive in itself, and you know, it can be fully empty and comprise the whole field, or it may have the opposition of a single individual symbol. For instance, the kilim on the wall over there has a major color field. Okay, it's empty, and basically in its individuality, the color becomes expressionist, as I said. So instead of being a background, I mean, you may argue that, oh no, it's actually the background of the motif. It rather defines an environmental essence or a milieu, you know, around the opposed motifs, the same way as we should see it like seawater around fish. Okay, is the seawater a background? No, it is not. It's actually the milieu, it's the medium in which the motifs live and gain their expression. So most of the time, an empty color field is itself enclosed in a reciprocal form, as for instance you can see in this kilim again. So it depends on the scale. So you have a succession of motifs, color field, and then at a larger scale, again, color fields and motifs. So it develops and fills the total surface. So in summary, the kilim style is generated by the combination of these two fundamental elements in a refined dialogue, and sometimes one factor overwhelming the other, like the color, overwhelming completely the form. It's an interplay between color and form. So the variety and richness of the combinations are a testimony to the weaver's creativity, and several examples reach the highest grade of artistic expression through their arrangement of form and color. Here, for instance, on this big kilim, you know, there is color and there is form, and they both complement each other in such a balanced way that we can't say which one. But you know, the form develops itself in rhythms, and the color is very, very expressive still. So we can now realize that the two-dimensional space created by the Kilim style is as unique as other types of image spaces like the Western perspective or Oriental miniatures. The intended ambiguity between the perceived background and foreground forms the essence of that space. And the space built out of mutual forms and color fields is basically organized around relationships and associative inferences, okay? Associative inference, I mean, you draw conclusion because there are things which are organized between themselves. There's a succession of color fields, for instance, on this kilim, together with some motifs, so it calls for an interpretation. To start with, it's about the relationship of the forms and colors between themselves, but at a deeper level, that space connects with another reality made of the invisible world of ideas, beliefs, and feelings. They take meaning within the cultural world of the observer as she or he penetrates into the kilim space. This is how the kilim images should be perceived and understood, and because one can physically actually sit on them, you know, imagine yourself sitting on this, not just watching it from a distance, it becomes a immersive experience, immersive artistic experience. So the properties of that space and the symbolic abstract nature of the Kilim's imagery definitely distinguishes them from other kinds of Anatolian textiles. The Greek or Coptic tapestry traditions, for instance, use a descriptive style, even though these also use slit tapestry mixed with other techniques. Associations of forms between themselves are most likely how kilim designs generate meaning versus the descriptive process of other imagery forms. The abstraction of the kilim styles calls for the cultural and learned background of the observer to process the relationship and generate the reading. Because it's abstract, everybody cannot read it, and what we have in our, as Jean-Paul Sartre said, in a picture, we can only see what we know. So the people, you know, within a given cultural context, the codes are made. Okay, in the book, there's actually a very interesting example that I am giving, which can only be understood in specific given cultural context. So this also, you know, the forms remaining the same, different observers at different periods might have inferred different meanings from the kilim motifs, although the symbols may have continued over many thousands of years. This also explains why at the end of the 20th century, when the kilim was rediscovered in the West, several motif interpretation teams emerged based on the contemporary perception of the history of Anatolia, like this mother goddess theory, because at some point in time, you know, Melat has found Çatalhöyük. This was working process. He thought there's a mother goddess cult here, which is now more contested. I mean that there was a mother goddess cult in Çatalhöyük by Ayhan Hodder and other people. So he projected these myths over the kilims, and it worked. Actually, I can tell. You know, it has created. So we project what we know. So we can address here a second paradigm used in the kilim studies so far. Anatolian kilims are not simply a slit tapestry confined offshoot from the very rich textile culture of Anatolia, but an iconographic tradition that springs from its own roots, notwithstanding some obviously scarce influence from the other textiles. So another aspect of the images which is linked to the meaning creation is the introduction of lifelike illusion. Any image possesses a latent power that becomes active by its impact on the sensations, mind, and the physical acts of the onlooker. This perceived expressivity, which develops as a meaning, is achieved by some properties of the image. You know, the German philosopher Gottfried Böhm suggests that the act of showing or monstration is exerted by an image is similar to a speaking individual, not only with the words from his mouth, but also with the hands and the body movements. In that communicative performance, a contrast emerges with the standing body and the back and forth moving limbs of the person, performing the act of showing. So several of the kilim motifs also present a body. You know, if you take this body here, there are extensions. So there's an engagement with the neighborhood, and there are hooks, there are arms, there are open mouth-like extensions. So these all give us, anything that interacts with its neighborhood gives the impression of life. And this is why how we feel that kilims have some living, refer to some living creatures. So as such, they establish a native communication with the onlooker, even though we do not understand the fundamental, fundamental language of the kilim. This is why there is a natural communication between the kilims and us. So now that we have analyzed the characteristics of the image, it becomes possible to investigate the set of the mental operations organizing these forms and the fundamental cultural beliefs. Thank you. Thanks. So anthropology and art history teach that the iconography of any given culture reflects its perception of the surrounding world. Therefore, we can try to identify which type of cultures could have created these images. In the book, I am presenting some newly identified iconographic connections between the kilims and the recent archaeological finds in both Anatolia and Central Asia. Well, actually here, for the time's sake, I did not do, but for instance, these figures of mountain goat was found in Körtiktepe, which dates 9000 before Christ. Now, the most important thing on this one is there is from the eye of the mountain goat, and there is a line that crosses from the eye through the body and then goes to the tail. Now, this type of things you see exactly on some kilims from Anatolia. Again, animal presented. Okay, if it was just the animal, I could not make that connection. But the fact that the style of this line crossing the body of the animal means that there is continuity between these two iconographic traditions, because it would be impossible that people, nomads coming into Anatolia in the 10th century would have dug these things out, and then they have found this made on a small bone, and then they say, oh, what wonderful thing, I want to do this on my kilim, Doesn't work. So this and other type of connections basically exist between Anatolia, but also within some artifacts found in Central Asia, as textiles or as on other medium. So among many other, okay, so how would such transmission be possible over several thousands of years? Now you say, okay, but how can a iconographic tradition continue over 9,000 years? This would be the question to answer then. So an imagery that connects people from pre-Neolithic Anatolian times to early historical periods in Central Asia and then to Anatolia at the end of 19th century requires actually a culture that covered a vast geography in history, that maintained also stability in fundamental traditions and transmitted them between generations. It also requires a culture that was able to appropriate elements from the surrounding cultures and harmonize them with its fundamental beliefs and visions of the universe. So here I should like to introduce a fundamental hypothesis that is supported by the historical and archaeological facts, that the communities that have followed a hunter-gatherer and later a nomadic lifestyle have constantly been present in Anatolia. The kilim designs have been developed and carried through the centuries within this nomadic culture in Anatolia. And as the kilim style matured, it was based on the fundamental universal vision of the nomads, but it also gathered and integrated elements from neighboring cultures. So in the book there is a large section laying out the historical facts and records that support that hypothesis based on historical sources, which are given also in a bibliography. So the remarkable persistence of nomadism's earliest cultural attributes and the perpetuation of these traits within the nomadic societies in Western Asia may form the basis for the evolution of the kilim in Anatolia. So this shifts a paradigm, obviously, that the history of nomadism in Anatolia started only with the Seljuk arrival in the 11th century. A lot of people, and if you look into the books, this is what you will find, that people oppose the locals in Anatolia, which they think they were all settled, with the people who came from Central Asia, Seljuks, at the 11th century. Actually, the fact is that there are historical records that there were already nomadic people under Byzantine rule, so before that, but also even before that, the Scythians, for instance, came into Anatolia before. They are written in Assyrian tablets, etc. So there must have been always communities, but the history of the nomadic communities is never written. Only Chinese, if you look at Central Asia, only Chinese has written the history of the nomadic people in Central Asia. So that's the most important point in getting also the different kilim theories together. So from the beginning, so as we come to that point, so I will answer the question of how the images that formed before the invention of the weaving anyhow, in 9,000 years ago or later, because the weaving has only been invented around 4,000 years BC. So how could we get, so that people actually, when we look at the images and iconography, then we have to look at the medium. So which medium at nomadic context could have carried? The settled people had their walls actually to make pictures, etc. The nomadic people had some rock carvings, and there were places where they go, from time to time, seasonally, and make them. It was a holy place, maybe it was a holy spring, a mountain, etc., because they were totemic and animistic. But then they probably needed to carry these magic, mythical things with themselves. So the first medium is normally either the animal skin or the tattoo, which we come into today, these images. Then the second medium, very interestingly, is the reed, the how you say reed in German?
Halm.
Huh?
Halm. Ja,
Yeah.
Reed, Schilf, also wie Schilfstangen oder sonst
Yes,
Stangen
and
mit
actually
dabei.
it is a very, very much used in nomadic life as shelters, etc. to inside
Against
the tents.
wind and
Yes, and we see major similarities between the reed screen, because some of them exist, reed screen decorations and the kilim decorations. Now, one more thing about the wool on the reed screens is not spun. So it means that actually, and it's very interesting they kept this. You know what shahtush is? Shahtush is actually the wool of a very specific, I think, deer in India, and it's
very precious, very
precious
rare.
one, and but this animal cannot be domesticated, so it's only in nature, and people go and take the wool from where the animal lives on the from the plants where they leave this. So in the beginning, people must have gone and taken also the wild sheep or so, and then started to dye it, because dyeing probably came before weaving. Then they must have dyed this, and this is why also the wool on the reed screens are unspun, and I don't know why they kept it all the time, through this. So this is the second medium, and then obviously also there is ceramic. Ceramic was also just around, I think, 5th to 6th millennium before BC. So the designs on the ceramic, and finally comes the weaving, and these designs are transmitted, on the kilim. So this is how the nomadic societies were able to keep the original mythical symbols and designs. Now, don't think that all the kilim designs were developed in the Neolithic or whatever, because it's the kilim designs develop as the myths themselves, or somebody has an original myth, and then somebody else adds something on it. 1 or 2 generations later, that now, for instance, in Europe, every country has its own tales, fairy tales, different myths. So they, by additions of the weavers, they add, and on the oral myths, people add some motifs, they add some new scenarios. So the kilims are the same, so the design is evolving. Don't believe that there was sometime a big bang of wonderful designs, and all of a sudden, all the good kilims were made, and then afterwards only there was a decay. So the older is better, yes and no, okay? It's in some cases it doesn't work. After all of this, I mean, I want to just say that this philosophy of the people, of the nomads, is definitely different than the one of the settled people, because nomads needed to live with nature, and settled people need to fight against nature, to make, to cultivate, to master. While the nomads, for instance, we see today in Siberia, there are still people who are moving with the herds of the deer, north and south. And this must have been also the same in some parts of the Anatolia or during the... So, on the kilims that most successfully apply the kilim style, the absence of the concept of a background abolishes the spatial prominence of any form as subject, and prevents the establishment of a hierarchy of forms, reflecting the idea of the balance of all parts of the nature. Man's individuality or superior position as a depicted subject is totally absent from an Anatolian kilim. This is not due to later Islamization, but to the fundamental and original beliefs of these populations. This philosophy is totally different from the evolution of the human thought in settled societies, as I say. There, actually, the image tradition is usually descriptive and all the time there also exists a clear subject to background distinction, and the descriptive style addresses itself to a broader settled population of diverse cultural backgrounds, where the ruling powers actually, be it the religious ones or political ones, need an easily identifiable iconography that describes the official ideology of the ruling class. So in the 21st century today, as we struggle in our search for a new civilization that should join progress in the quality of life with care for the planet in a sustainable association of opposites, looking at kilims and understanding the soul of these weavings helps us in the quest for a new way of thinking. Dividing the whole space into two opposite but fully interdependent entities that shape each other, the kilims require us to consider not only our way of seeing their motifs, but also how we look at the world. Reaching the consciousness that any motif or any conscious action that we are doing that comes into existence impacts its neighborhood and is intimately bound with a meaningful opposite forces us to consider the whole and to the awareness of what happens to the other part as we divide the space into our living environment and of the world and the rest. Voilà. Now, questions.
Yes, please questions. And thank you.
You're welcome.
It's such a big field, and you managed to really squeeze so much of it into limited
it's
time.
Complex.
Thank you.
Yes.
Und einfach Fragen.
Are there?
May I ask?
Yes.
I'm very impressed what you were saying. I think it also has to do with the.
Wenn Sie ein bisschen lauter reden.
Mit dem nach C.G. Jung, nach dem jetzt kann ich es nicht gaxen, das allgemeine
Das Unbewusste.
Unterbewusstsein from everybody, from every human being, and in this time since the Enlightenment destroyed all the witnesses, we are not able, most people are not able anymore to connect.
Yes.
It has also something to do with the participation mystic.
Probably yes.
This animal you showed with through the whole, I think this is the key to understand these kilims, because it's connected with the cosmos.
Yes, exactly. I think we are saying yes. We say the same thing.
Yeah.
That the unity of life,
Yeah.
unity of life, and that interdependency of unity of cosmos or interdependency of things is very much in the belief, fundamental belief of the this nomadic and pre-nomadic people, because this is what today it is called mythische Denken, but yes. We come back to it. We come back to it.
Okay.
Yes, we come back to it. I think. Yes.
Can you tell why? I think it's very interesting. There is a part where the color is changing. Is there a meaning of the direction to look at this card? Should it be verticular? Because this is out of the whole practice. This here
Yes.
and here, and there is another.
The color change.
Yeah, change only here. And for me, it's a sort of direction. I don't know. It must be by purpose.
This can be for. Yeah, indeed. I mean, coming from my home, I know that sometimes small signs help. They are practical to discriminate one part from the other part.
Yeah.
Now, why is that made? Today we do not
We
know.
don't know.
Because
No,
on
we
such a
can
kilim,
just
I mean,
think,
maybe it was for an important person. When you put a kilim
Yeah.
and somebody comes, an important
Probably.
person should rather sit on this side than
Yeah.
on the other side,
Yeah.
or the reverse. Because it's a large kilim, so it must be used for a very community event. It is not just for home. It's
Yeah.
not for an American home. It is so people must be sitting around or over this kilim and performing some festivity or another activity. But this said, sometimes these changes, actually, these are the changes that elevate, a piece from a normal piece into a masterpiece. So because masterpieces make the canon, but also masterpieces break the canon. So this is a relatively known common design. I mean, this design is many kilims were made with this design. However, how do you break within the constraints of that composition? How do you make it stand out of the normality? Is actually the artist's artistic performance. This is why I was talking about as of when do we go from the artifact, into the art. And these are the clues to show that this type of things actually, and as kilim collectors, we are extremely sensitive to this type of things. And that makes a huge difference between two very similar pieces. Yeah.
Question. How
Yes.
old is this kilim?
Sorry?
How old?
How old is this kilim? Well, currently in the book we said, because normally, we can separate kilims into, we know this is 19th century, or we know this is 20th century, fine. We know this can be 19th century because with the dyes, etc. But then as you go into the 18th century or before, we are today unable to say, except when we do radiocarbon study. But radiocarbon study is not conclusive for pieces which are made after 1650, more or less. So we believe, I think in terms, and this is, actually there is science with the carbon dating and there is connoisseurship. And connoisseurship is something we acquire over years. Arlette has seen kilims for the last 40 years, so she can make already a relative chronology without knowing when was the earliest one, but we can still make it. So we believe that this is 18th century or earlier, and with high likelihood that it goes 17th or 16th century maybe.
It's quite very interesting. It's three-dimensional, and it's
Yes.
amazing.
Yes,
This is amazing.
yes. And we
Just
were-
using color.
Huh?
Using color to achieve it.
Yes, but
Yes.
it's amazing that they used it and they make three-dimensional, which today we are looking at three-dimensional. And this is quite interesting. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's an important point.
Yes.
Sorry.
And here, yes, you are fully right. And we believe that actually, it depends on the proportion of this open space to the closed space, which actually makes the force of that kilim, which was properly dimensioned. Because many kilims of this sort are existing. Now, this is number one, a weaving which is very excellently executed. When you think about a one-piece kilim, which is about 4.20 meters, and you need to, if you have made any weaving or have been, to be able to get the line straight till the end of the kilim, from the beginning to the end, usually, things go one way or the other. So this is the work of very experienced weavers and master weavers. But this is not a workshop. So, so it means that it was made actually when the nomads lived in large, rich communities, and that they were, having their own large community where they could get together to make such big weavings.
Only men did it, or also only women, or men did it? Who did it?
Women.
To our knowledge, only women did it.
Women did it.
Women.
But men are. But here is the story. Actually, women did it, but this says the dyes, the sheep.
Of
Okay,
course.
because it all starts with the wool. Sorry, okay? So, who is running behind the sheep? Well, both women and men, I would say.
We're not
Yes,
talking,
okay?
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Like about the background, which
Yes.
is the background.
Yes.
Both of them did.
For
it.
having commissioned some pile carpets myself, just for learning, I can tell you that the process starts really from the wool,
You're
from
right.
the sheep. Actually, it starts from the grass. Like here you have also, like when you do cheese, you have the cheese of the ground or the
Quite
high.
interesting.
Yes, exactly. No, that's
Yeah, can I quickly
yes.
make it a little bit more image-like? Like, of course, like if you're a nomadic tribe, there is another nomadic tribe. There's a Yaila, like an Alp, and the grass is fatter there or fatter here. So basically, the guys will kind of fight out who gets the better area with the better grass. So
Yes.
that's already one of the basics. And then the dyers are normally not the women, but the transporters of the language of the depiction, and the ones who weave in the end are the women.
Yes.
So it's
The final process, and then the men read what the woman has said. They know what, for instance, what girl. Has
or sometimes they're not interested. But
or sometimes
whatever.
they are not interested.
But basically, it needs both of them. It's like this. This blue doesn't impress us without the red, and so on. As you say, it's all of it is significant.
Quite interesting.
I was just very quickly. I was just talking about these women because normally they were not credited enough. So
I tell you that within their own society, they
definitely, but
You know-
from the stupid Western participants. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry, I'm
if you
speaking my
read-
mind.
Yes, I agree. In the last times, in the last century, yes. But if you read, for instance, the novels of Yaşar Kemal,
Yeah, of course,
Okay.
it's a different story.
and he is really speaking about these people and such a woman who was very well seen because
Of
she
course.
made the best kilims,
course.
etc. So actually, it was an act of mastery. Some women really wove wonderful things, or some tribes in a given, and then they would even commission things for others. Okay, not with their own designs, but sometimes there are commissioned kilims.
One like these take a lot of hours. No? Takes long time to make something like this. Wow.
Yes, it's and actually the kilim. Yes, they say because actually the other part which I forgot is we say it's all a question of the wool, but spinning the wool. Spinning the wool is actually to make a good kilim is actually the one of the biggest secrets, and the fineness of the yarn on this, and then you see with the effort it takes, to pack the yarn as tightly, and also there is this other kilim from on the wall on the left side. You will see it's extremely tight, fine. So there's a lot of energy actually packed into such a work.
I just have a question. If you look at this huge kilim, and you say the nomads who had those pieces, in what kind of a building did they use these kilims? And in what was going on in this building? Was that just a reunion room, or was that a representative room, or was that just the normal living room for these people?
Yeah. Well, first thing I would say is that there is no when you put something outside your tent, all the mountain or the yaila is open. I mean,
The sky is the roof.
the sky is the roof. So they
ground
could
is
use
the-
this outside. However, we know also that there were tents which were large enough to contain such kilims. Actually, if you look at the dimensions of now, we are only having information about the dimension of the tents of the end of the 20th century, which Harald Böhmer and others have registered on, But it is obvious that the richer families and the more numbered people had probably tents which may have been much larger than this room here. So that's not unlikely that they had such a place, because at the end they come into the yaila and then they set up their tent. I don't know if some of you have this book from Art Anatolian
It's here.
Nomads.
Yeah.
You know, he has made some drawings of tents, and you can see there may be enough space in this. Okay. Any other question or discussion which you do not agree or? Because these ideas are some emerging ideas, and so I really enjoy also having a discussion about these versus what we know. Yes.
I just want to say for those that when I saw this kilim in Ali Riza Tuna's book, I was like, wow, because this is a type of kilim I have always loved with all my heart. And this is the most beautiful one of this style I've ever seen. And it is a super important piece that almost bowls me over. I could sit here for 20 hours to watch it. Just so you know that if this is not art, what is art? That's what I see.
So now, well, this is a fragment of a very iconic kilim that has been, found in several parts in the past 30 years, and parts of this kilim are in different collections. One is in München, and another one now is back in Turkey. It was in Popmeier collection before through Gallery Seiler. The piece actually, I found it 25 years later, after the first fragments were found in Anatolia. So it shows you so it's a little bit of the Sammler's Glück. And then obviously we made it mounted. The conservation here is very important because we did not restore the part. We just rendered the original image through backing, so that the form and the colors come back to life as it should be. So here, people would say it's a niche form. Actually, this is a double niche because this is only one half of the kilim. The other half was underneath, and there was a double niche. And the overall color play is basically extremely interesting. It's not the same as here, but there's the same understanding of the color force with these forms, and it definitely lacks regularity. So what recently in the discussion about kilims, I was saying regularity is not a quality criteria for kilims. Okay, it's the contrary. Because there are also now on the market some fakes, etc. Made, which are sold at very high prices, and we are trying to get some criteria to be able to distinguish those and counsel people about. But in itself, again, it's an abstract work of art, so it reaches the level of work of art because the colors are giving us, opening our breath, I would say. And this is a very important part, actually, on the Anatolian kilims and carpets, and this is explained in the book, but the color is not, if you look at the color scala, the color, it is not red, actually, it is moving, between the red and the blue, or the red and yellow. And also in terms of one is Satigkeit, but the other one is also the level of gray, where you place the color. So the dyers of the Anatolian kilims and carpets, for the best ones of them, knew exactly which point, on the color space to to place this such that all of a sudden, you know, the color is coming not as a banal or as a, you know, flat color like some of the Pantone colors, for instance, today, or chemical colors, but just exactly at that point. And it's very important to detect this type of colors. I personally have an advantage. So physiologically, when I see such a color, I start smiling and I start breathing. So then I say, okay, it's the good one.
Good. And tell me,
Yes.
I don't know. There is a lot of blue in this wonderful kilim. Is this special, extraordinary, or is it normal? For me, kilims don't have so much blue.
Well, I would say yes. On this kilim, the amount of blue versus others does not shock. I mean, I don't see any difference versus in terms of color
Okay.
balance.
Yeah.
Okay, but where maybe you are right is that the blue and red, okay, are placed together such that you know. So that's also again in the book I'm explaining the two major color schemes on the Anatolian kilims. One is you have the complete color scala, you know, is where you have the completion of the color red, blue, yellow, and the other is just red and blue. So the other nice thing about this kilim, on this part, you see the complete color scala with you know, like green and red complementary colors, and then yellow and purple complementary colors. Okay. So this is all the time, you know, one primary color with a secondary color. But on this end, there is no more yellow, no more green. So we are back into the second color, major color thing for the scala for the Anatolian kilims, with only reds and blue. So this is why probably your impression is thanks for pointing this out. It's an interesting part. I mean, two things here. You see, I talked about color fields. So 3 red color fields, and they carry, you know, these nice motifs here, and the fact that they act as a medium rather than a background. You know, you can see all these changes of color and shades here into the. So it is not just maybe it has substance in itself, and it's expressive. Also, the wonderful border here, wonderful border just by the colors and forms again, and look how nicely this you know, white area is appearing as a negative space beyond the. So that's again same thing here on this border, you know, this the black and the white are very complementary, and again this opens itself. He says, I am just making room for myself. I'm interacting with you guys, or I'm dancing, or I'm doing something to my environment. So I'm living.
Are these colors less bright today, or have they always been this way, or are they through age less bright? Do you know that?
Yes, there is always a what we call. I mean, it's also I learned this by experience. Some colors require a little bit of time to settle because there are components like in yellow, for instance. When you do it from the plants, there may be 2-3 chemical components that basically one, for instance, gives a more greenish tint to the yellow, and you don't like it in the beginning. You know, the first month I have seen it, I said, what's this yellow? I wanted a good yellow from you. And they said, oh, wait, we know what we are doing, but it has to go under sunshine. So then 3 months later, under sunshine, in ultraviolet, that chemical components disintegrates, and the greenish tint turns into more red or yellow. Okay, so it would be false to think that the dyes do not change. The vegetable dyes do not change, but they become stable after some time, and then they remain, unless obviously there's dirt or chemical agents, or like urine, for instance, changes the color. Like sometimes we acquire kilims from families, and then children have urinated on them, and there is a big area. So these are let's say chemical changes, but the dye itself, if it was kept in an environment of relatively okay lighting, you know, they will be they mature. But I personally believe the dyes mature over time. Some of them mature very good, and some of them, if they were not nicely made, they can be less good. Yes.